Hi there. Welcome to Shrewd Wife Life. I'm Lillian, just Lillian. I'm not a psychologist, and I haven't been to Bible college or any place that would separate me out as especially holy in knowledge. My credentials are the fact that I'm a survivor. I'm a sister in Christ who believed all the Christian teachings on marriage and lived them out. And what happened is that I ended up trapped in an abusive marriage for almost 34 years, not even realizing it was abuse. That last phrase, not even realizing it was abuse, isn't something to brush aside the way I did for so many years. If your marriage has lots of conflict or lots of unresolved conflicts, it might be the key to understanding your situation. Through my journey, I've accumulated some interesting and some disturbing knowledge about how wolves in sheep's clothing can stay hidden in marriage and even thrive within the Christian community and churches. The clip you're about to watch is taken from my main video titled Discover the Truth About Submission and Respect, the Sarah and Abigail Effect. I've put a link for that at the end of the video. I want to take us back to the beginning, back to the roots of our faith, our Jewish roots, because that's what Peter's doing when he tells us to emulate the holy women from the past in Sarah. I mean, there's got to be many reasons he specifically set them up as mentors for us. We need to understand how wives can be sincerely following what they think is right guidance, yet the outcome in their marriages doesn't get better, or it ends up worse than what it was before, which is what happened in my case. How does that happen when the heart of you, as a wife, truly wants an authentic and strong marriage? I want us to look at Sarah and Abigail because there's something really interesting here. Both Sarah and Abigail submitted until they didn't. And they were both preserved and even blessed by God. And you know what else is really interesting? Abigail lived in the projection of being equally yoked, but it was Sarah who experienced being equally yoked. As daughters of God, it's important to consider how biblical principles apply to different types of husbands. I'm going to break down 4 marriage concepts that cause the most friction and frustration and confusion. They are submission, respect, a quiet and gentle spirit, and supporting and affirmation. But I'm not just going to arbitrarily break them down. Instead, I'm going to hold them up against 2 archetypes of marriage. I'm going to push those 4 concepts into the marriage of Sarah and Abraham. They're archetype 1, and the second archetype is Abigail and Nabal. By using these archetypes, we'll be able to understand how the same marriage concept or idea can be appropriately applied if you're married to an Abraham type, the husband who's wounded and causes a lot of dysfunction in the marriage. But that same marriage concept is extremely inappropriate if you're married to a Nabal type, an evil man who's destructive to the marriage, dangerous to you personally, and harmful to everyone in your household. So without further ado, let's dive into the deep end with submission. Following the interpretation from the traditions of men, that single word plays out like this. You should always submit to your husband's leadership and headship, because that's the position God designed you as a woman to be in. After you get married, you will always be filling the role that's in the inferior position of the hierarchical structure. Your husband has all the authority in the home and the marriage, and you have none. In order for a wife to truly be godly, she must recognize and accept her husband's God-given authority, not just in the home, but over every aspect of her life. Because it was Eve who caused the fall of humanity. She's a woman, and so are you. It's godly to support even when you disagree with him. As a believer, you want to align your understanding of marriage with biblical principles, but it's also important to consider the context and the nature of the husband in each marriage. In the context of Sarah and Abraham, her submission to her husband is a beautiful example of a wife honoring her husband's leadership. In Genesis 12, we can see Abraham's obedience to God's call to leave his homeland, and Sarah supported him wholeheartedly. Despite their challenges, Sarah accepted Abraham's authority, which was, and this is key, it was rooted in his obedience and relationship with God. Sarah was able to reflect to Abraham the very submission that he was demonstrating because she witnessed how her husband positioned himself under God's authority, in that inferior position under God. There was no double standard where Abraham said one thing and did another. There was no confusion that made Sarah's submission to Abraham more or less different than Abraham's submission to God. The marriage between Abigail and Nabal present us with the contrast between the first and second archetype. Nabal is described in 1 Samuel 25 as a fool who's an evil man. He was selfish and reckless. These are the traits of a man that's dangerous, not difficult or dysfunctional like Abraham was. Nabal is a dangerous man. He endangered his wife and the whole household. It was Abigail's wisdom and discernment that saved them. Her competence was praised by David and even blessed by God. Here's the thing I wish I'd understood about submission when I first became a believer. Abigail could not submit to Nabal because Nabal did not submit to God. He isn't explicitly described as an atheist in practical terms, but by living in a way that disregards God's presence and influence, he conveys the message to his household that God's authority doesn't matter. And by refusing to place himself under the authority of God, Nabal made it impossible for Abigail to offer wifely submission. His unwillingness to place himself underneath God set the foundation and dynamics of the marriage he was supposed to be leading. A husband's submission to God directly influences and enables the wife's submission to himself. In order to submit to the type of husband that's a Nabal, a wife has to deny the reality of the authority structure that God has put in place. Submitting to this kind of husband means you have to lie to yourself about the reality that he's demonstrating for you. For most of my marriage, I chose to ignore this truth, the truth of God's authority structure, and instead, I blindly submitted to a man like this. It demonstrated my naive gullibility, and it led to mental and emotional damage for me, and it did destroy the people in my home. The authority structure and the one-flesh relationship must overlap. It's important to distinguish between the partnership found in the roles of the authority and the relationship. The function of leadership and submission are significant, but they are incredibly incomplete without the relational responsibility of headship and the body factored into the picture. Without this overlap integrated into the marriage, the authority structure becomes a tool that enables irresponsibility, negligence, and sin. In a healthy marriage that reflects Christ and His church, the husband's leadership is characterized by his willingness to place himself in the inferior position under Christ. Ephesians 5:25. Only when a wife witnesses this behavior will she feel safe to submit. And by safe, I mean it's safe for her emotional and mental capacity to adapt to whatever scenario is being placed before her. Applying the advice to submit universally without considering the nature of the husband can lead to problematic situations. For wives married to godly men who genuinely seek to lead their families in obedience to God, submission can foster unity and harmony. But for those married to husbands like Nabal, or on the Nabal-like spectrum, those who are emotionally cold, unloving, and indifferent, with zero regard for God's authority, a different approach is necessary to ensure safety and well-being and peace.